Time for another history lesson. And today's topic will be some facts about the ancient Roman Empire. I'm going to start with this. From the time that this Italian Empire, and that's what the Roman Empire was, an Italian Empire, because from the time it was founded during the 7th century BC, Rome was located in Italy just like it is today. That's one thing that hasn't changed. And that's where the Roman Catholic religion was first begun. And this Italian empire was controlled by royal bloodlines. And from the time that it began, it set out to assimilate as many other cultures as possible into being just like it. And why did it do this? Well, it did so because the satanic and Nephilim bloodlines have always tried to force others to adopt their ways. This isn't anything new. This has been going on for at least 7,000 years. If you go back far enough, find that there were wars between the Egyptians and the Sumerians between 5,000 and 4,000 BC. And the Roman process that I'm describing here is described as the process of Romanization in this book right here. And process of Romanization of the native peoples. And process of assimilation of native peoples isn't referring to the native people of Rome. It's referring to people who lived in areas outside of Rome. And the Roman emperor named Augustus spent long periods of time in Spain and in Gaul. And for part of his reign, he ruled from these two places. And Rome also went to war with both Spain and Gaul, with its military comprised of quite a few young, strong men. And here's a little bit of information about the Gauls. The Gauls originally descended from the Sumerians, and the Gauls were white giants, described as being huge, taller, and more warlike than any Italian. And of course, any and all races of giants were descendants of fallen angels. Now, in case you think that I'm just making that up, you can find references to it in a book called The Romans. That's where I found the description of the Gauls. And it's also in Children of the Matrix by David. I can find it there too. And it's possible that if the Gauls were descended from the Sumerians, that the Sumerians were also descendants of fallen angels. That's quite possible. I mean, I'm not 100% certain of that, but it's up for you to decide. Up to you to decide. And the Roman Empire was very successful at this assimilation that it set out to create. And the Roman Empire was first founded a few hundred years before the 1st century AD by two groups of people called the Latins and the Etruscans. And the Etruscans were the people who lived in the area known as Rome before Rome was ever founded. Etruscans. And I do not know what race or what nationality the Etruscans were. All I know is that they existed. And by the year 200, places like Britain, Syria, Africa, and southern Spain had become Romanized. And all four of these places were now speaking Latin and building amphitheaters, stadiums, and public buildings that looked exactly like Roman buildings. And this only happened because of the wars of conquest and the bloodshed and the murder that Rome committed against Britain, Syria, Africa, and the Spanish. And if they hadn't gone out and gone to war with all these people, none of the people in these countries ever would have adopted their culture. That's how they're able to get people to adopt their culture, through bloodshed and murder. And they have this obsession with those two things. I mean, America is the new Rome. And that's why we have all these sporting arenas that are modeled on the amphitheaters where the bloodthirsty Romans went crazy over watching men spill each other's blood with swords. And today you have sports fans who go gaga watching football players attack each other. And I'm guessing that a lot of people consider themselves to be more civilized than the ancient people were, and maybe to some degree that's true, but what's the difference between watching football players attack each other in a sporting arena and watching two men spill each other's blood, other than the fact that the football players aren't getting murdered? Really, no. And our government buildings, our courthouses look just like theirs. And a lot of the words that we use, like history, legislature, senator, spectacular, interrogation, all these words are Roman words. Just don't pay attention to that, it's my cats. And Romans and Latins, of course, were white people, and in case you don't know this, a lot of white people descend from the union of cursed humans and evil spirits, aka Anakim or Anunnaki, devils, cannibals, giants, fallen angels, etc. And I'm not so sure that this refers to all white people, and so I can't say that I'm being a bigot, because if something is true, it's true. And this is why the Romans enjoyed watching men in a theater spill each other's blood, and it's also why they started so many wars. It's because their nature was satanic, evil, and bloodthirsty, plain and simple. And the Romans also kept slaves. And a Roman leader known as Augustus had established a 4% sales tax on the sale of slaves, and if a slave wanted to become free, then it was law that the slave would have to pay a 5% freedom tax directly to their masters. And all this tax money that we're talking about here went directly to the state, into the pockets of the government and the politicians. And that's another thing, politics. Our model of politics is directly derived from the Roman model of politics. Their Senate, their legal system, legislature, and all of that. And in the 3rd century, the sales tax that slaves had to pay was raised from 5% to 10%. And I don't think I need to tell you that most slaves wouldn't have been able to afford to pay this fee plus the sales tax because they were very poor people. That's just common sense, right? And there's one book that I read that says that the slaves were from the same race, same culture, and the same language as the Romans, meaning they spoke Latin, but I know that's not true. That's just a twisting of history. And a lot of the Roman Empire was built on the backs of the soldiers, the slaves, and the working classes. And that's how the leaders of this empire made all their money, off of poor people and through plunder and ravagement. And just like the New Rome, controlled by the same illuminated bloodlines known as the Illuminati. That's what we call it now. And the reason why we use the term Illuminati is because these bloodlines, such as the Merovingian bloodline or the bloodline of Charlemagne, so on and so forth, consider themselves to be more pure than the rest of us. Not to mention smarter than the rest of us too. They think we're all stupid. They think that we're all inferior to them for whatever reason. I don't know exactly why, but lastly, during the 3rd century, there was a war against Carthage. And this war completed the Romanization of Spain. And this was a couple hundred years after Julius Caesar invaded Britain in the year 54, which was another war of conquest of many wars of conquest started by the Romans to Romanize Britain and Romanize Carthage and Spain and kill quite a few people in order to satisfy their satanic thirst for blood. And all these invasions of all these places, it's like Gaul. And I'm not sure what the Romans wanted from the Gauls. I mean, and I'm not sure what gave them the courage to go up against a bunch of Nephilim either. But so like the same people today going into the Middle East in order to spill the blood of millions of Middle Easterners in order to satisfy their satanic thirst for blood. And why is this still going on today? It's because the people who control this country are of the same bloodlines who control Rome. And some of them are what we refer to as Khazars. And the Khazars don't call themselves Khazars, they call themselves Jews or Israelis. I call them Khazars because that's what they are. Because right up until the 700s, that's what they were called. They were called Khazars. Then all of a sudden, they changed their name to Jews after they had a conversion to Judaism during this time period. They stopped calling themselves the Khazars, and now they call themselves Ashkenazi Jews. Or, I guess in some cases, Sephardic Jews. But they also have an intense thirst for blood, too. And so all this is basically just history repeating itself. And since for thousands of years you've had these satanic people on this earth, you have the same patterns repeating themselves over and over again. And that's really all I have to say. I hope you learned something. And do some research yourself, and you'll find that what I'm saying is true. Good night.